this video, we're going to have a look at procedures and functions and how we can use them in our programs. So, it seems pretty self-explanatory, but today we're going to go over procedures and functions. We're also going to have a look at what arguments are and what parameters are and the difference between them. And we're also going to have a look at the power of reusable components and self-contained code. So, what is actually a subprogram then? So, when we're writing programs, sometimes you need to use a subprogram. And a subprogram is a small section of code that can be run from anywhere within your program or within another file that you might import in. We've seen these before when we use things like the scanner class, like .nextLine. We might use them when we have system.out.println. They're all subprograms that we are reusing over and over again, and the code stays the same. Now, these subprograms come in the form of either procedures or functions. And that's what we're mainly going to look at today, the differences and how to write them. One thing that's really good about subprograms is the fact that they're easy to debug, because if an error is in that subprogram, we know it's there and only there. We only need to fix it in one place, and that will then cascade down to the rest of our program. And we don't need to fix it in multiple places like if we repeated it. So these are the differences. You can actually see that both for procedures and functions is the same, with the fact that they're self-contained. Can be called from your main code as long as it's within the reachable scope. They can take arguments. And then the difference comes with this last bullet point. Procedures don't return a value, whereas a function does. And we'll go into that when we have a look at the code examples. Now, the differences that I want to show today is parameters or arguments and what the difference is. Now, we've come across these before when we've actually been using the code in our examples. I want you to have a look at the code that I've put on the screen. You can see that I've declared a main method and I have used the system.out.println method to print something to the screen. When you're writing your subprogram, in the brackets, you may declare what that extra information is. That's what we call a parameter. It's a definition of something that can be used by our subprogram to be able to complete a computation. An argument is what you actually use when you are using the subprogram properly. So you can see the red box goes over a parameter. That is defining some additional information that can then be used within that procedure. The green box is an argument because it shows the actual data that's going to be used within that procedure or function. So parameter is the definition, an argument is the actual value that's being passed. So let's have a look at procedures. Just a little heads up, we are going to do procedures and functions together before we actually do the demo. So a procedure is any subprogram that does not return a value. So the main method's a prime example of a procedure. You can identify procedures very easily within your programs where if you can see the keyword that says void. So in our main method, we write that first line at the top that says public static void. Void means it doesn't pass anything back or returns a value. So it has to be a procedure. Here's some examples with using the OCR exam reference language or pseudocode. You can see that we actually use the keyword procedure, so it makes it very, very clear what we are doing. I've put two examples of procedures down, one that actually has no parameters and one that has parameters. So you can see with that top example, if we call welcome message, it will just print out the line welcome to this application. If we call the method multiply, we would have to supply two numbers, num1 and num2. It would then print out whatever num1 multiplied by num2 is. Nothing gets passed back, it just prints it out to the screen. When we look at this using actual Java code, you can see that it doesn't overly change. You'll see that it actually looks like your main method when we've been doing all our other code, but the name of the method has changed. So in this case we've got welcome message, and in this case we've got multiply. That keyword void means it's a procedure. Note that during our declarations of our parameters, we have to say the data type that it will be using. Once it is declared there, you can see that we don't actually need to declare the type of data it is again. And we use those curly brackets to denote the start and end of our procedures, rather than saying procedure and end procedure. Let's have a look at functions then. So this is making our code do something, but also returning information for the user to use. So a procedure is any subprogram that does return a value to us. So for example, when we've been using the scanner, when we've been doing our file handling, we used the method .hasNextLine, and that returns either true or false. That is a function because it gives us back a true or a false value. Subprograms are identified as a function if they have the keyword return. So when we have a look at these examples next, you're going to see the word return, and that tells us that we are using a function because we are giving something back once that function is finished. Here's an example. Usually functions will take a value in, okay? Not always, but 9 times out of 10. So they will usually have a parameter, or you will need to send an argument. So you can see here we've got function squared brackets num. Within that function, we then say squared num equals num multiplied by num. So it's the number multiplied by itself. We are then returning that squared num. You can see I've actually accidentally made a spelling error, and I've put fund function instead of end function. So always make sure you are checking your spelling. Outside of that function, I've actually put the call. So you can see value equals squared 4. So 4 is going to be whatever num is. So squared num equals 4 multiplied by 4, which is 16. So when that gets completed and it returns 16, that 16 is then being stored here in value, which then means we can use it for further processing later down the line. If we look at it in Java, you can see that actually it looks extremely similar. The only difference is that instead of having that void keyword, we've now got the word int, which is saying I'm expecting that an integer is going to be returned from the function. Now this data type could be anything. It could be string, it could be boolean. There's loads of different ways that we could look at that. Again here, we're calling it just the same as we did before, but we're having to declare that value is going to be an integer, and that 16 will then get stored in there. Again, if you've got any questions or anything that you would like to add, please put it in a comment, and I'm more than happy to have a look at that and answer any questions. Right, let's give this a demonstration and you'll be able to see how this works when we put it into real terms. Let's demonstrate how to actually use procedures and functions and create them in your code. Now what I've actually done is I have already created a class. I've called it subprograms. I've imported the scanner, and within my main method I have created some code that just asks for the user's name and asks them to enter a number. I didn't decide to go over that with you just because it's stuff that we've already done, and the focus is on the procedure and functions. But just to show you that this works, we'll give it a run. I don't know why it's giving me the little error codes there. There's nothing to worry about with that code. It does all work. So enter your name. So I can put in T1 computing, enter a number, and I can put in 27. And that's all my code does for now. what I want to do is, once I've entered those details, I'd like a nice welcome message to go up onto my screen. So I'm going to make a procedure. So, welcome message procedure. So I'm going to add this code here so that you can see it. Now, when I was talking about scope before, we make these functions and procedures outside of our main method, but within the class. So the main method can see everything that is within the subprograms class, for example. Okay? And anything that's been imported. It can't see anything that's in another file. That is my scope. When we use this public keyword, and we're going to go over this a little bit more when we look at object-oriented programming, this public keyword shows that anything that's declared as public can be seen by anything else that is within that class and be manipulated by anything that is in that class. If it's private, only that class can see it. So let's make this welcome message. So we're going to use public because we want our main method to be able to use it. Static, and we're going to use void because it's a procedure. So let's call it welcome message. It's not going to take any parameters in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make just a very simple screen. It looks a little bit like this. And I'm going to put welcome. It's not going to be exactly in the middle, but it will be fairly-ish close. And there we go. Very simple welcome message. So to actually call that in my code, I can say welcome message. Now you'll be able to see that I've not actually bothered assigning it to a variable because there's nothing to assign. Nothing is being passed back. So this is a procedure because nothing is being returned to my main method from where I've called it from. So let's click run. And we should get the same thing, but this time it should say welcome. So put in Teeland Computing, put in my number 27, and there you can see I've now got my little welcome screen. Now let's say that I actually want to make this welcome screen a bit better. Let's add in a parameter. So we're going to have a string. In fact, actually, what we'll do is let's introduce you to a topic that's called overloading. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that exact method that I've already made, but this time I'm going to overload it. Now what that means is that I'm making the exact same method, but this time I'm going to take in an additional string or an additional argument. So I'm going to have system.out.println, and we're going to have our stars. We're going to then put in that plus name plus, I don't know how many I'm going to need to do that, maybe an extra couple. I know it doesn't line up there, we'll see how it goes. So now, what I can do is, I can pass name in. And even though these look the same, because I've got an argument here, Java will be able to pick the correct one that I need to use. So let's click run. Sometimes it takes a while because it has to compile the new code. So Teeland Computing 27, and you can see now it's actually put in that additional code. I just want it to try and line up a bit better actually. Let's try that. I mean, obviously depending on the person's name, it'll make that line shorter or longer all the time, but we can make it close to being perfect. There we go. So Teeland Computing. If I just call the welcome message straight after that, we should just get the one that says welcome, and we won't get an error. So this is what we call overloading. Okay, same definition of the method, but different amount of arguments. And there you go, you can see it's printed out both. So that's a procedure. Let's actually have a look at a function now. And I'm going to make the exact same one that I made before. So squared function. So public static, but instead of void, I'm going to put int now, because I'm going to return an integer. Squared. And that's going to take in a number. Now, I'm going to make an integer called squared value, and that's going to be equal to num times num. So it's multiplied by itself. And then I'm going to return squared value. So let's have a go at this. So I can put int value equals squared value, and I can put in number, which was the 27 that I got earlier. Let's run that code and see what happens. So again, it can take some time once it's compiling other new functions and procedures. Whoops. Oh, that's right. I've just changed. There we go. Just narrowing my code. It's very important that you do make sure that your method names and method calls match. So just to make it clear, this is a call. And then these are definitions. So enter your name, Teeland Computing, enter a number. And you can see it says welcome Teeland Computing, but it hasn't seemed to do anything with this, but it has done it. And this is the main thing that has changed. We've returned the value, and the value's been stored in here where it says value. But we haven't done anything else with it, so we can't see that. So what that means is I can actually use it for further manipulation by myself. Now, just for the sake of argument, I'm just going to print it out, and I'm just going to put number plus squared equals plus value. So if I run that, and you'll be able to see the code will run exactly the same as before. Teeland Computing 27. I'll then get that welcome message, and then you can see it's put there 27 squared is 729. So you can see that function did run, it just wasn't seen because we didn't do anything with the returned value. So you've got to remember, with functions, you've got to do something with that value. Let's review everything that we've done. So what's actually been covered in this video? Well, we've had a look at arguments and parameters. We've also had a look at procedures and functions, and we've also demonstrated how they actually work in Java. So I've got a little challenge for you. I've given you a function there just to get you started, but what I would like you to do is I would like you to have a go at creating a program that is a working basic calculator. The operations of the calculator should have their own procedure or function. Okay, it's your choice. So you can see I've used a function here for add, but if you really want to, you can use procedure as well. Now I've put this in pseudocode. It's your job to actually put it into program code. So see if you can have a go at that challenge, and I will see you in the next video.